It was here at the Tennessee State Capitol in 1925 that one of the great American dichotomies entered the American story. That year, an East Tennessee farmer legislator named Mr. Butler brought his fears regarding the theory of evolution to the Tennessee State Capitol. The Butler Act then made it illegal to teach the theory of evolution regarding humankind in public schools. So one can argue here then that it was precipitated that year the great American cultural divide between fundamentalists and social conservatives on the one hand and between secularists and social liberals on the other hand. So when we were given the opportunity to take our Tokens show down to Dayton, Tennessee, to the Rhea County Courthouse, the site of the famed Scopes monkey trial in 1925, we discovered very quickly that the story was much more interesting and much more provocative than our inherited assumptions about social divides would ever allow us to believe. Token Show is a Nashville-based variety show comprising a mix of great Nashville musicians, author interviews, comedic sketches in this sort of radio show format, with each episode geared around some theme relating religion and American culture. So it turned out it was great fun trying to film a show in the Rhea County Courthouse, which is still a working courthouse to this day. We put as many people and perhaps commotion in that room as had been since the famed trial in 1925. But we made the mad dash and showtime came. Good evening, my friends. Welcome to the Token Show down here in beautiful Dayton, Tennessee, nestled in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains here in Rhea County Courthouse, the very courtroom where the famous Scopes trial was held in 1925. William Jennings Bryan and Clarence Darrow and an array of attorneys gathered here in this room arguing about the meaning of life. In 1925, the year the Scopes trial was held here in this room, the Western world had recently just exited one of the bloodiest wars in the history of humankind. Some 16 million people had been killed in the trenches of Europe. It had been, according to perhaps a naive Woodrow Wilson, the war to end all wars. And in the midst of the naivete of ending war through war was the sentimental but nonetheless real longing that the horrific consequences of might makes right, of survival of the fittest, might be overcome somehow through mercy and peacemaking, with a sort of love which is patient and persevering, evidenced by one of the best-selling hits of the war era. There's a long, long trail winding into the land of my dreams, where the nightingales are singing and a white moon beams. There's a long, long night waiting until my dreams all come true, till the day when I'll be going down that long, long trail with you. By the 1920s, the United States found itself in an age of excess. It was not sentimental songs of love in the midst of war, but a bit more self-indulgent excess that was desired. Perhaps a societal narcotic of dealing with the losses of the decade prior that spelled a new liberty to some and a new danger to others.
Sometimes you dance in a one time, that's called Charleston, made in South Carolina.
Ms. Odessa Settles. It seems crucial to place the fear around evolutionary theory in the early 20th century in its proper context. The midst of war and supposed decadence and the dissolution of the moral commitments that had promised to hold society together. All societal goods, for many, seemed threatened. And in the midst of all the perceived moral dissolution came yet one more perceived threat: the teaching of the theory of evolution in public schools. Professor Ed Larson's Pulitzer Prize-winning book, Summer for the Gods, helps place the cultural debate in its larger historical context. Ed helped us make sense of those factors, visiting with us in the museum in the lower level of the courthouse, as well as being interviewed in the show. He spelled out the historical factors of how the trial arose. Tell us briefly historical background. How did this trial come to be?
Tennessee passed a law outlawing the teaching of human evolution in public schools. That itself arose out of a crusade launched by William Jennings Bryan. There had been growing opposition to teaching evolution, but it had been mostly in the churches. That is, they didn't want evolution taught in the pulpits. They didn't want a preacher preaching that humans evolved rather than came from Adam. And then Bryan had the idea of carrying it to the schools and saying, we don't want public schools paid for by taxpayers teaching the idea of human evolution. That started about 1922. He crusaded across the country, dozens and dozens of states, spoke at the Tennessee state legislature, and that became his first success.
Ed went on to explore the fascinating common ground between the two opposing parties. Charles Darwin made it possible, as Richard Dawkins put it later, to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist. Darwin was seen by such folks to be a new savior, to overcome what they saw as ignorant hostility provoked by superstitious religious conviction. For many theists, on the other hand, who were also fearful of the war and hostility and apparent demise of Western civilization, Darwinism seemed to tear down the last remaining moral restraints, the final bulwark against anarchy. The most recent war, millions slaughtering one another with industrialized efficiency, and the most recent decadent excess, embodied in the robber barons with their industrialized laissez-faire plundering of the poor, were but survival of the fittest written large through militarism and capitalism. It's just remarkable that the most basic observations about the trial in Dayton challenged the cultural categories of right and left that would develop so rigidly in the subsequent decades. The so-called monkey business was not merely an argument over how to read the Bible, as much as it was a symbol of the fear of an ideology that would undo all that mattered to human society and culture.